Welcome everybody to this very invigorating interview and conversation today with Professor M.M. Pant. It is an honor to speak to him every time, and this is our formal catch-up after 1 year. Last year, he spoke with us at Manga High, and he shared his views about how the pandemic can be handled through a lot of interventions using mathematics, and also his views about education system as a whole. And now the idea this year in this catch-up is for us to take, a stock of how things have been and how they should go going forward. So for all our viewers who are joining in, I'm just going to give a brief introduction of Professor Pant, because if I go into the details, it will take a whole hour. So Professor Pant is a PhD in computational physics, along with a professional law degree. He has been a practitioner in the field of law, IT-enabled education, and IT implementation. Professor Pant has been the Pro-Vice Chancellor at the Indira Gandhi National Open University and on the faculty at IIT Kanpur, MLNR Engineering College, and on the faculty at University of Western Ontario, Canada. He has been a visiting scientist to research centers in Italy, England, Germany, and Sweden, and has delivered international lectures with about 80 published papers to his credit. With over 40 years in research, teaching, administration, and managing government and private enterprises, he is now working on designing and building systems that can meet the challenges of an inclusive education of high quality. His personal commitment is for enhancing human capital through personalized and inclusive education and transforming teacher training to foster the development of a professional group of independent educators. He believes in the maxim that convergence between various media and technologies would fundamentally alter the way learning would be created, packaged, and delivered to learners. His current activities are all directed towards actual implementation of these new age educational initiatives. So welcome, Professor Pant, to this conversation today.
Thank you.
Like I said, we are catching up after an year, and what a crazy year it has been. So much has happened that we never even imagined, and probably we should have some idea of, or through our calculations, we should have known that this is coming. But can you share some of the positive success stories you may have come across in the last year around education, both in India and abroad? Just because I want to start on a positive note, and I want everybody to feel at ease that, not all is lost.
No, nothing is lost. In fact, very often it is said that when there are challenges, completely new things happen. And in fact, I could give you a full 1 hour lecture where everything which was a crisis really led to something which was so the point over here is to talk about the examples that you are saying. There were many things which people were feeling uncomfortable about the existing education system. And there have been so many people who have been commenting on it, expressing views, and so on and so forth. And many educational thought leaders have been doing these things. What has happened is now is an opportunity to really implement some of that. And I will therefore refer to you, since you asked about a few examples, I'll refer to you 3 or 4 things which have happened during this time, but were brewing much earlier also. They kind of got accelerated and adopted now. One of them is Sugato Mitra's self-organizing learning environments. So he has been talking about this. He did this when he was in an IIT. He got a TEDx fellowship to implement it, etc. And therefore, the key takeaway from that, which I am developing now, is that self-learning is the core. So from moving away to teaching people, you have to get to enabling them to become self-learners. And that's why I began with Sugato Mitra, because he's been doing this for a long time. And he showed all we are now doing is pushing the frontiers to how much can people learn on their own and when they need some guidance. So that would be called guided self-learning. This will be self-learning. And this is very important because now we have self-driving cars.
Yeah.
And we have software, which is self-learning software. So if you can have self-driving car, the self-learning software, why can't we have humans who can learn? And all children have demonstrated their ability to self-learn in the first few years of their life. It's only after schooling starts that they find learning difficult. Before that, they're always learning all their waking hours they are learning.
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting thing. So to me, the big shift that we are seeing is the shift towards self-learning. It can, as I said, we go up to the boundaries and where it can, we take them to this thing, but not everything has to be taught. In fact, Guy Claxton, who is also a cognitive scientist educator, he has a very nice word he coined for this called tautitis. He said children who study in school become victims of tautitis. They cannot learn anything unless they are taught. And so we have to reduce the dependence on, reduce the effect of tautitis and make them more and more, which is what they are saying. Even in the COVID, if you say, they're saying eventually it is your immune system which matters. Everything else is incidental. Eventually it is your immune system which matters. So there's the other example I want to talk about here is something called eCode42. Now, eCode42 is a software training institute, program, whatever you want to call it, which began a few years ago. They took this name 42 because there's a famous book called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where 42 is the answer to all the questions of the universe, and they called it eCode42. The beautiful thing is, it is a software training site or institution where people would come physically, because this is pre-pandemic, but there were no teachers.
Right.
So they learned by themselves and they became proper software. And it was so successful that they created one in Silicon Valley and one in Portugal and so on and so forth. So that's another very interesting example, which we can then take on and in sense adapt, implement, whatever we want to do. The other thought I have is that self-learning will be facilitated by learning apps. And they will be AI-powered learning apps. And the biggest example today is Duolingo. Duolingo is a language learning app, which is amazing in terms of its infrastructure, etc. And I see that more and more those kind of things will happen. So when we say people will become self-learners, they could be using such AI-powered apps to do this. In fact, it's so interesting that I never realized, because I am in this. So somebody was sent me a message, because I do all kinds of courses. He said, if you teach me English, I am happy to pay you a monthly sort of amount and so on. And I said that I don't really teach these things directly myself, but there's an app called Duolingo, which is for free. You can download the app and you can even learn from, earlier it was English to other languages. Now it also has Hindi to English and other languages, and you could do that. And he was amazed. He said, you mean without a teacher I can learn? No, yeah. This is again a very, very interesting thing, that we somehow have this belief that we cannot learn by ourselves unless there is somebody who is teaching. That app has a huge amount of, you will appreciate that there's a huge gaming approach. The whole approach is a gaming approach. It never looks to you like you are learning something. It begins by trying to do what we call finding the level of a person, or what in formal programs called placement test. It kind of asks you that how much time are you willing to give every day? 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Then it says, what level are you? Do you know something about it or not? And then engages with you in seeing where the levels are, what vocabulary you have, and so on. So to me, that is going to be another thing. And the fourth comment that I want to make around this, and I don't want to keep on talking and talking, is to remind you of C.K. Prahalad. C.K. Prahalad was a very famous management guru who became famous for his book called Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. But what he really said something was very interesting. He said, don't look at the best practices of people. Look at the next practices. Look at what you will be doing next. Because best practices mean they were successful at one point of time, etc. Actually, it is time for them to go now. So he says, you think of next practices, and I like that very much. So I think this is what I'm trying to say. I don't know. Everybody is making attempts to deal with it. Everybody is making minor improvement, etc. But the things which I thought is fundamental were some of these things.
Absolutely. I think I really like the point that you mentioned, that history is not destiny. And that is something that we have to understand. We have to imbibe that, what has happened in the past is a good thing to, it's a good metric to start from. But what can happen later, like you said, that next practice, not the best practice. So best practice has happened up until now. Yeah.
Okay, Prahlad said it. I'm
Yes.
okay, echoing
You're
it.
quoting him. Absolutely. So, I think in principle, educators also felt that self-learning is the way to go. Teachers also felt, and parents also felt that. But do you think it was really put into action in terms of online teaching as well as assessments? Where do you think at least the Indian education system stood, where teaching and assessments
So see, the point is, the Indian education system was totally unprepared. Not only unprepared, it was hostile to online learning and remote learning.
Right.
So I have no hesitation in saying this. It was still then absolutely hostile. All the authorities, all these things that you cannot do this and this is not acceptable, etc., and so on. So that was the big problem. But the problem is, and I think this is a good time to start thinking of next practices, and that's why I gave the example of Duolingo. That you don't teach English by again having an English teacher and doing Zoom talks and so on and so forth. So, but this is nothing surprising. There are so many instances that whenever some new technology, or I wouldn't think it's a new technology, a new way of doing things happen,
Yeah.
people just added it to the earlier way of doing things. And then it took some time to transform. And I can give lots of examples, but the example I will give you will be about the film industry, the movie industry. So when movie cameras came in, there was no such thing as a movie industry. So there was a theater industry. So theaters were there. So when the first movie cameras came in, to make that movie, they would put that camera in the fourth row, center of this thing, at a reasonable distance from the stage, and let whatever actors were doing be made into a movie, which could be then seen by people who could not go to that stage, etc. It took some time for somebody to realize that no, I can move the camera. I don't have to keep the camera fixed here.
Right.
And then, as you know, the whole new metaphor of long shot, close up, medium shot, this, that started coming in. But initial years, they just recorded it like an audience in the theater, because that is what they could see. And then when television came, if you remember, the big thing was Sunday movie on the TV.
Yes,
the same movie they saw on TV, right? Same Chitrahar song. It took a long time to realize that TV production is completely different. And now you have a whole set of people who are TV stars, TV technicians, TV professionals, and so on. And now you have this OTT which has come up. And you have a whole cadre of people who are OTT people.
Absolutely.
Now, this is going to happen in education. So what happened is when the first time something came, whatever video or VHS tapes, etc., they had teachers teaching in class and then they did it. But as it evolves, now I remember a long time back, there was an interview of a professor from, I think, Harvard or somewhere, who was asked by one of the private companies to come and make a video, because educational video had become popular, established. You know that there is teaching company, great courses, and so on and so forth. So he was invited to give a talk somewhere, and he was explaining how what these people were doing was very different from what Harvard would do. He said when he went there, he had a very interesting thing. He was recorded, and now these people had all the people recording from different kinds of things, not just one person recording a talking head.
Yeah.
And after that, he was very curious. He said, but tell me, who were the students? Which class were these students from? He said, none of them was a student. They were all aspiring actors trying to evoke how a student would feel when you would say this.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. See, this is the transitions. He said, I can never imagine a university having brought in actors to simulate the response of the teacher to a class. And this is what is my hope, that when we will see the thing fully done, it will completely transformative experience. They will not know that I have learned. I mean, you will be in whatever modes with the person.
Yeah.
And 1 hour will happen, you will have no feeling that this is good. Nowadays, a lot of people talk about the attention span not being more than 8 minutes, 10 minutes. That is because you are making a boring talking head.
Yeah.
But if you make it an engaging thing, even an hour will go away without any problem.
Yeah.
So the future and assessments will also happen without the person knowing. Now, nowadays, in many corporations, when they hold the interview, the candidate doesn't even know that he or she is being interviewed. It is just over, they meet over lunch or dinner or this or that,
Yep.
and they assess the person. So why do you have to give a 3-hour test CBSE board exam paper? You are continuously assessing. And this is known. See, if you've been in school education, you will see that very often a teacher will look at the exam result of a student and say, but I thought you would do better than this. What does it mean? That she's been assessing all over, not only from that exam thing. Now, if a teacher can say in class that I thought you would do better than this in the exam, it means the teacher is already assessed. And this is the point. So assessment is a continuous thing. And now with technologies, it will happen. So I have no hesitation in saying, and again, I am echoing the words of Anthony Selden, the CBSE and other boards will disappear. There will be no value in it because when I go for this, you look at the noise about CBSE exam. There is a pre-board, there is this, there is training 3 months, this month, then you go and give the exam. I don't want you in that best possible circumstance. I want you in your day-to-day circumstances. If I'm going to engage with you, either as an employer or a colleague, or even you are my research student, I want to know what kind of a person you are, not what you are in your best thing when you have taken 3 months time to prepare for exam and had a model test.
And the irony is now that we are talking about the third wave and it being affecting more deadly for children, and now we are saying let's call them for assessments, let's call them for board exams, because the class 12th has to move on and something has to be done for them to go into graduation. So it's I think the problem is our propensity to put things in silos. Okay, this is my work life. This is my...
Not silos. See, the bigger problem is we don't want to address the problem.
Yeah.
And I am no hesitation in saying this, and I will tell you a story also. See, I, like many others, also believed in all this Hanumanji ko prasad chadha do, ye kar do, wo kar do. And for most of my life, there no problem arose because I was good in studies, so I got good results also. Yeah. Hanumanji also was pleased, and I also ate the laddus. My first encounter with reality was when I started my innings as a computer programmer. So this is 1966. I am trying to solve problems in TIFR. That was the only place which had a computer and so on. And as happens in computer programming, you've written a program, it works. Then you do something, and now it doesn't work. And unless you have debugged it, and I'm saying this with all seriousness, so it used to take some time before you got your next chance. So between that, I will go to the Hanuman Mandir also, and this Mandir and that Mandir, and Shiv Mandir. So Hanuman Mandir on Tuesday, Shiv Mandir on Fridays. But the program would not work. Yeah. Unless I have debugged the program, it doesn't work, no matter how many mandir I go. I can go to Mahalakshmi Mandir, I can go to Hanuman Mandir, I can go to this thing. But this I learned very early in life, that problems, unless they're solved, will not be solved. Going and praying as much as you want and giving as much prasad as you want.
We've seen that in this last year, that nothing could save us, right? Only our actions could, only our preparations could.
Exactly. So this is the problem. So the problem with our education is that it is not the problem with the children. It's the people who are managing the learning, providing the learning, who have no idea what they should be doing. And therefore they put sanctity on these tests, etc., which are completely irrelevant. It is completely, and they know that it is completely irrelevant. But the difficulty we have is that, so the CBSE wouldn't know what to do. So they have to preserve the CBSE, and therefore they have to hold the exam, and therefore they have to, that is why they were so vehement about the 12th, because 10th people said we can do without. If people know that they can do without the 12th exam also, then what does CBSE do next year? We know how to do without you.
Right.
So it becomes very important. So the point is that now we are coming more and more people who know what they want are able to assess. So all corporates which are assessing are not looking at some standard question paper. And the point is now we are moving to appreciate. It's very interesting. And that's why I'm a critic of the new education policy and all those government policies. You see, their assumption is, if you look at the new education, the assumption is all children are the same.
Yeah.
And they follow a certain chronological age-wise growth. At age 5, they're this. At age 7, they're this. At age 8, they're this. Where did this come from? We know that no two children are alike. How can 100 crore children be the same? Well, all you have to look at is anybody who has seen young children. And many people have two children nowadays, even though by and large it has become binary 0 or 1. But some people still have two children or more. And they can see that even their children are very different. Going to the same school, same parents, same home, same this. To say that 100 crore Indians will all on age 6 learn this is hilarious.
Yeah.
It is hilarious to say the least. So therefore, what we are now seeing, and this is the good news, because you are not allowing gathering in large number, you'll be back to individualized instruction, personalized instruction, and all those methods in whatever way. There is some time for transition, but eventually that is the way it will move on, because very few people will have the courage to say 500 people in a room and we are going to teach them, because it is not the coronavirus of one time, it is continuously mutating also. And the time of mutation is about 11 days. The more infections there are there, the more varieties of mutations are possible. So that's why in India, this is happening more, because the population is larger number of people are infected. So the opportunity for mutation becomes even more, and the diversity gives rise to that. So if you say why mutations happen, there's a much diverse range available here than in the smaller countries with a similar kind of a thing and so on.
Yeah.
So the model of small or eventually one-to-one will come up. The good news is technology allows you to do that. And that is where I give the example of Duolingo as an app. So now, no matter how many, and I told you in the beginning that Malawi app, but that did not have AI in it. But now we are going to look at this. It's a completely different thing.
Right. So I think language you touched upon, I think all these apps are there, and a lot of programs that I'm also seeing, but I'm going to steer a little bit towards mathematics, because very recently I think 2 or 3 months ago, there was this whole study on 4 or 5 states of India where the math learning losses are shown as extreme, 2 to 3 grade levels already. And that's getting exacerbated due to the COVID closures. So what would you say about that? I know before this interview, we were talking about building the love of the, just the beauty of maths, not just the practical application of math, but beauty of math. So if you can just throw a little bit of light as to what parents can do, what schools can do.
See, first is maths as a compliance issue, that they expect you to do this, you do that. There are many of them. In fact, Q1 method was very popular long before computers came. We went to a Q1 center. Q1 had put the entire thing from adding horizontally, adding vertically to 27 levels to calculus, and it would test which level you are. And so it's very easy to implement. There are so many others, photo math, pi math, this, that, any number of them, because maths is a coveted subject and people want to do that. But just like I said for maths, I am a great proponent of putting the love of learning to begin with. Once you do that, everything happens. And I share the story with you that when I was, I think, about getting to be about 50 years of age or so, I was once with a set of doctors from all India Institute of Medical Science. And we were talking about some conference, but as a side thing, I said, can you help me understand? So what happens is that I was with a bunch of doctors from all India Institute of Medical Sciences. We were on some other project, but informal conversations, I said, I'm curious to know, I'm turning, let's say, 50 or so. Why is it that grown-up people cannot learn as fast, as much as young children can? And I was expecting he will tell me something happens to your nervous system, this, that, whatever. But he said something very interesting. He said, biologically, there is nothing. You can keep learning as much till your last day. What happens is our patterns of learning change. So if you look at a small child, all the waking hours, the person is learning something or practicing something. We learn from lunch break to tea break to coffee break. So this is a very important thing. So once you create that love for learning, whatever subject it can be, and I am very happy to talk about love for literature, love for history, love for science, love for maths, and so on, then the person is self-propelled. Now, it is a good time to draw the analogy from the coronavirus thing. The coronavirus does nothing to you. It gets you to replicate everything that it wants. It is not like one of those weapons, which is a bullet or a gunshot or a gunshot. No. It comes quietly, talks to your DNA, and starts telling your DNA that I have the right thing to do.
Replicate.
Exactly. Now, once we create that love for learning in the people, encourage their curiosity, keep that happening. It will keep on happening forever. The problem in the formal system is that there is no love for learning in the teacher or the principal or the board. So they are all doing a certain duty. It is all compliance. But if that happens, and the very famous Robert Frost, was famous as a poet, he was also he said, "I am not a teacher, I am an awakener." And you see this happens everywhere. Wherever you get awakened into something, you want to know something, you are going to be interested. So the whole idea is to keep that interest around, keep that activity, and also keep showing something more that is to be expected. It should never be seen as over and out, completely done. It should always be seen that this is what we learned, but there is more to it. And this is, to me, the main story. So you create a hook for more. Not as some wretched thing which you have to do and somehow you have done it and it is over, holidays have come and so on.
Exactly. That's what we were discussing, right? 100 out of 100 says you are done with it. You've basically achieved
all. It will always be what's more.
Proficiency.
So you've now learned this, what's more. And I have no hesitation thing. When I was this thing, I was always looking forward. So we learned trigonometry in the class 12. I was doing that. Oh, when we go to BSc, we will learn De Moivre's theorem and this thing, etc. So this whole idea that you will continuously be learning is to be, rather than it is something to be done and over with. And so that is to me the real thing. And there are so many ways in which you can do it. You can allow people to look at that. What happens when you create, and this is why, for example, many people are against, for example, prescribed text or this, because you see that is the only thing. And even becoming too specific. So people tend to relate to that. And it is ingrained. So as I said, all children are curious and they want to learn. Now, as they grow, instead of encouraging their desire to learn, we kind of push them down and say, stop doing it, or give them some extra thing. Board mein nahi aayega, IIT mein nahi aayega, or whatever, so that you don't have to.
So this is exactly what we're talking about, right? So you mentioned two things. One is, of course, self-learning, which is something that educators have to encourage, parents have to encourage, and children have to come to that understanding that I am the creator of my learning. My journey is different from my peer, even my sibling, and I have to run it. So that's the first thing about self-learning. And the other thing you mentioned is, of course, building a love for learning, whether it's history or English or maths. Where is that love? I think that's where it can be a very good partnership between technology and apps and also teachers, because technology will free up the time and the mind space of teachers to actually focus on the engagement, to focus on the love for learning, the history of the subject and things like that.
So, absolutely. So it is going to augment the teacher. So for example, in my view, every teacher will have a teaching assistant which is powered with AI.
Absolutely.
So because like in many other questioning and call centers, you escalate things. So simpler things are answered by an AI. And in fact, you might have heard that Professor of Indian origin, Ashok Goel, in I think Georgia Tech, actually used an AI teaching assistant. So he had 10 teaching assistants, 9 of them were human, 1 was AI. It was based on the technology of IBM Watson, and it gave her a female identity and called it Jill Watson. But it was AI which had been trained, and people couldn't figure out that it is there, etc., and so on and so forth. So every educator will have a teaching assistant, and every learner will have an assistant to aid the learning. See, so when you are not able to, we said you are self-learner, but you're getting stuck, then this learning assistant of yours will help you. So for example, you come across a word which is difficult. Now, even before you think of going to the dictionary, it will tell you, no, this is not in your vocabulary. This is what it is. This is its meaning. This is the context. This is what it has been used in.
Yeah.
And sometimes people may have problems with language. So you say, but in your language, this is called this. So you may understand it faster. So I see a world where teaching assistants, learning assistants, and so on are there, and much higher order learning is therefore happening. So that is a very, very
yeah, I mean, it's also about evolution, right? There was one generation where the answers were only found in libraries. So the effort to get out of your house, get into a bus, go to a library, get the book from the rack, and then come back with that knowledge was the way to do it. But now, because it's a higher order evolution, we have actually made these things available on the touch of a button. We can now indulge in different kind of inquiry, different kind of scientific temper.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, it is a very interesting thing. So we are right now in a stage where there are a lot of resources available, but we are not using them. This happened in the past with people like us also, that earlier, when you had some valuable resource in the library, there was no other way except trying to read as much of it and making notes of as much of it and imbibe to write them. When photocopying became available and was often for free, you would just make photocopies of it and keep it but not read it.
Yeah.
So this is what has happened today. We have so many technological solutions that we just don't use them anymore. I remember that when they were, I say this very often, when there were no photocopying, it was, you read everything, noted everything, internalized everything, memorized everything, and so on. When photocopying became available, when it was reasonably priced, you took only rarely certain portions of the photocopy. You make notes and only certain things. And when it became liberally available, you made all that, kept it in the stock and later without.
Nobody used it. Absolutely.
Similarly with the here. So what we have is we already have so many. So I often try to tell teachers that before you start making your lecture, just look at what is available and tell them to use that and build on it. You don't see in how many different ways can you say what are the 3 laws of Newton's force. There are already 10,000 videos on Newton's laws of motion. In how many different ways can you say what is Pythagoras' theorem? How many different ways can you? There is no point. Your job is not to give that information, but to help appreciating that information and relating that, finding meaning, making sense. That is the role of the teacher, finding meaning, making sense, not just the raw information. Raw information is not. So last pandemic, everybody rushed to this. So I would say, in fact, I have come up with a very interesting idea, which I'm announcing today in another session. So I have come up with an idea called learning prescriptions. So I say, instead of teaching everything, I will give you a prescription. So watch this video, read this blog, read this article, hear this podcast, etc. and so on. Why do I have to? And then when you have an issue with that, then we have a conversation. Yeah. Like you do with a doctor. So if the doctor prescribes some medicine, then you say, yes, I took that, but this, then the doctor continues the conversation. Doctor doesn't sit with you while you are having the medicines. Yeah. So why should I sit with you while you are watching the video, etc.? You watch the video, you read the book, and try to see what difference does it make, and so on. So I'm coming up with this idea of learning prescriptions.
So this prescription sounds very interesting, but I'm just curious to know, how will it take the person from the state of knowing to doing and being? Because those are also very important in internalizing all of this knowledge.
Right. So we are assuming this is a grown-up person who are interested in their welfare, and therefore they will do that. And in the conversation can be, again, so I am building on 2 concepts there. One was called bibliotherapy. So bibliotherapy was an idea where you gave people books to read and that would transform them. Right. The other more professional one is called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. This is used in psychology where they are not doing any other thing, but they are just having sessions with you, conversations with you, doing various things. So I'm trying to build something like that. It's just an idea
No, I mean,
about
it's not an idea. You've actually put them to use. You don't even realize it. So this is the beauty of it. 2 years ago, you gave me a book called Mathematical Mindsets by Joe Bowler. It was in a set of many other books that you gave me. And I was just thinking about it, that how much we underestimate the power of failure or the power of not knowing something and struggling with it. I mean, Joe Bowler so plainly in one of our chapters says that every time you make a mistake in math, you grow a synapse. And I found it very profound to say that, is that really true? If I'm doing things right repeatedly, more than that, I'm learning when I'm making mistakes. So that's
so this happens. See, this happens very often when you're looking at going somewhere and knowing the path to it. If you've never made a mistake, you will never be able to have the right path. If somebody has always taken you to that path, you will never know what the way is. It's only when you made a mistake and corrected that mistake and from that point gone back to wherever you were supposed to go. So this is the very interesting part.
So I think this is a very good segue into the last question, which is, if you were to think of 3 reforms right now, I know things have happened, schools have coped, online education has taken different forms in different schools. For some places it's WhatsApp, some places it's video, some places it's Zoom call. But overall, what would be the 3 reforms that you would think the education system needs today?
So my thing is that the first one is developing foresight. The first thing that education should tell you, and this is what intelligence is all about, is anticipating the future. And anticipating the future with your own skills. Not that somebody has told me that this will happen, that will happen, because that person may not be responsible and so on and so forth. So looking at what is happening, anticipating the future, to me is the most important skill today. And I say this by giving the analogy of sports. If you are playing cricket, they say your eye should be on the ball. You're playing football, your eye is on the ball, not where it was, where it's going to be in the next few minutes. And then you position yourself to benefit the most out of it. If you're going to kick the ball, if you're going to defend the goal, if you're going to make a catch or you have to anticipate the future and position yourself to do what you want to do in the future. So that's why developing the future, anticipating the future is most important. Developing foresight is most important. The things that are today, you cannot do that in very specifics. So you have to see mega trends. And you have to see mega trends and become part of that, because when that wind or current is flowing, you will be part of it. So look at the mega trends that are happening. And these are available in so many reports. If you are a person who really wants to see everything from the original, then look at the Nobel Prizes being given. The Nobel Prizes in physics and chemistry and medicine is what gets translated into industry after a while. Even the selfie that we take, a CCD device got a Nobel Prize someday. Right? So that is the part. So then that you can have a 15, 20-year horizon. Have a lower horizon, look at where the investments are being made, where the patents are being granted. Political rhetoric has no meaning. Where patents are being granted, that means products have been available. Where investments are being made, people see this giving rise to results. That is where things should happen. And then have a balance between something for a larger thing, something for this thing, and so on and so forth. For example, I have no hesitation in saying that if somebody wanted to know what should they be looking at today, the hot area is cybersecurity. There is zero unemployment in cybersecurity. Right? Coming ones are artificial intelligence, machine learning, and something which people may not believe. Quantum technologies are coming much faster than we had ever thought. In the next 5 to 10 years, because this is publicly declared. IBM has said, I want to make such and such a computer by 2030. Google has said, by 2030, I will have such a computer. D-Wave says, I'm already selling computers worth millions of dollars, and so on and so forth. And all the countries, US, UK, China, even India has put out 8,000 crores for quantum technologies. So this is what you have to do that. And then the support. So Why does maths become important? Because whether you do quantum technology or you do AI or you do epidemiology and modeling of this thing, you are back to maths. Because that is the core language of nature. So this is the kind of a thing. What people say that a couple of decades ago, we had gone to narrow specialization. Now we are looking at what is called depth with breadth. So you know a lot of things, because what happens, drilling at depth will be done by machines. So you have to understand the conceptual basis of things. So you don't have to know, just like we were talking about math, you don't have to do all that machine learning algorithms yourself, but you should understand what tool do I use for which problems. Where do you need this thing, what is appropriate for what. Then the machine will do that. In fact, I almost said in some of our talk that they will be like we have, grocery shops, they will be algorithm shops. So you can go and buy this algorithm, that algorithm, and plug it, get on a USB drive and plug it in. So that is not going to be important. But knowing how to cook, what to cook, is this going to be a nourishing meal for me, or is it going to enhance my diabetes and blood pressure? That is what is important. This understanding is going to be more important, and that has to be the purpose of education. And it has to be a lifelong education, because the generation that is before us is going to lead very long lives. I tell, when I'm speaking to very small children, I said, you are going to spend your honeymoon on the moon. So you have to prepare for that.
Absolutely.
Right? And your silver jubilee on Mars or something else. It's a very different world that awaits them, and they have to be ready for it.
I think we all have to get ready for it. As families, as educators, we all have to get ready for the unknown, the VUCA. I think, at least for us in India, because of the COVID and the second wave, we are again, open to accepting things. We have really seen, a lot of things that we were not expecting. So I think that curiosity has again risen, and hopefully we learn a lot from this episode, and we are able to not really go back to the earlier ways. I think we were all reminiscing the older days up until last year.
No, that will, see, time is a one-way arrow. There is no way you can go back to the past.
Absolutely. Great. So thank you so much for this interview, and I really appreciate the time that you gave us. Thank you, sir.
All the best.